You're listening to the Global Leadership Podcast, relevant leadership conversations for you, the curious leader. I'm Ashlyn, your producer and host. Today, let's get curious about how to be more productive personally and on your team.
The people who just say that they feel most calm about life, they're ones who have built systems into their lives to force them to think more deeply about the choices they are making. Because the best thing you can do is avoid making the choice that doesn't actually get you closer to what you want, no matter how productively you do it.
The problem is not the amount of hours we have in a day, although I'm sure if you're listening right now, you've dreamt of a world with more hours. Today's problem is the fact that we are all extremely busy all day long, but we're not necessarily productive with the hours that we do have. Today's guest is Charles Duhigg. He's an investigative reporter, Pulitzer Prize winner, and best-selling author. Charles has a dynamic conversation with Emmy Award-winning journalist Paula Faris, all about productivity principles based on his New York Times best-selling book, Smarter, Faster, Better. On this journey, you'll also hear from other leadership experts as we uncover ways to eliminate busyness and hone in on practical ways to be more productive. Are you ready? Let's get curious. Here's Paula and Charles.
So what I'd really like for the listeners to cull from this conversation is ways individually and collectively as a team that we can be more productive. But let's just kind of, first of all, push back against that myth that busyness means productivity, because they're two separate things.
Absolutely. And that's only more true now than it used to be. And it's interesting because there's economic studies that show until about the 1980s, for most of the world, busyness and productivity did overlap a little bit, right? If you were at the factory and you were working 8 hours and you're busy for 8 hours, you probably did 8 hours worth of good work. And then the computer revolution starts.
Right.
And computers are wonderful and they increase our productivity. But one thing that they do in the world that we're living in right now is they create a situation in which you can be busy all day long and get nothing done. Right? You can spend your entire day replying to emails and by 6 o'clock in the evening realize I did nothing that I wanted to do today. And by the way, even if you're at inbox 0 and you just replied to 150 emails, that means you have 300 emails tomorrow because everyone you just emailed is going to email you back.
I'm getting overwhelmed just thinking about all those emails I need to answer tomorrow. I want to talk about the principles. You talk about 8 principles in Smarter, Faster, Better. Today, we're really going to focus on teams, managing others. But before we even really dive in, how do we determine what deserves our attention and what doesn't? And what's the importance of asking yourself that question?
I think it's a great question because the importance of asking that question is the most important part, right? So this is what we know. We know that productivity is different for every single person, how you define productivity. In fact, productivity might be different from day to day, right? A productive Wednesday might be one where you get your kid to school as fast as you can, and then you get to the office and you get through all your meetings. And a productive Friday might be exactly the opposite, where you walk your kid to school and you feel like it's productive because you have time with them. So what's the difference? How do we distinguish what is productive and what isn't? It's by creating systems in our lives that force us to ask that question and that give us time and space to think about it. So if I am on autopilot and I'm acting on some decision that I made a year or a month or a week ago that isn't the right decision anymore, then it's not productive. No matter how efficiently I'm solving last year's problem, if I'm not asking myself whether this is the right problem, then I'm not being productive.
Right.
And what we know is that the most productive people, right? The people who end up getting promoted fastest in jobs, the people who end up earning the most money, the people who just say that they're happiest and say that they feel most calm about life, they're ones who have built systems into their lives to force them to think more deeply about the choices they are making. Because the best thing you can do is avoid making the choice that doesn't actually get you closer to what you want, no matter how productively you do it.
Yeah, it's a really important distinction, not just that busyness does not mean productivity, but I think not compromising who you are, what you're about, and what you want to do. And I want to back up a little bit. You talked about how productivity, we need to define productivity for each of us, and it's going to be different for each of us, but it can be different from one day to the next. My Monday productivity might mean I have five meetings back to back. I need to get emails out at the end of the day, and then my Saturday might mean I don't want to look at emails. I don't want to think about work. I want to spend time and invest in my children, and that's equally as productive.
Absolutely.
And having that balance, and I hate that term work-life balance, but it's a freeing message in many regards that you need to be a whole person, and productivity is it's not a to-do list. Productivity is investing in others and not compromising who you are and the type of person that you want to be.
I think that's exactly right. And I think a big part of it is knowing what your why is, right? Why am I going into work? Why am I spending time with my kids? Why do I see some things as being rewarding and other things as not being rewarding?
Yeah, that's good.
In fact, one of the things that I talk about in Smarter, Faster, Better is that there's a whole science around to-do lists. And many people have been taught that you should make a to-do list that has 50 items on it, right? So
that's me.
Yeah, right.
Would you like to look at my phone right now?
And it's very natural. But it turns out that this is actually the wrong way to do a to-do list. It's a great way to do a memory list because it's much easier to keep tasks on a piece of paper than it is to try and keep it in our head where we feel like we're forgetting things all the time. And so what we should do is we should sit down and we should write all the things that we want to do today and next week. And that's our memory list.
Okay.
And then from
so that's not the to-do list.
That's not the to-do list.
It's the memory list.
It's the memory list. And it's great to have that. And we update that every day. But a to-do list ought to have at most 3 things on it. What you can do is you can take your memory list and you can go through it, and your to-do list with these 3 things on it, you draw it from your memory list.
Okay.
Right? But instead of saying, I'm going to do the first thing on my memory list because it's at the top of my memory list, every morning you look at that memory list and you say, what's the most important thing to do today?
And you're doing that in the morning. I know that you have refined your system when it comes to your quote unquote to-do list. And you write those 2 or 3 things in the morning because it could change from last night as opposed to this morning.
Absolutely. Or if you're the type of person who finds that, you're a night owl and it's easier to do it, to make that choice the night before, it's really the question of figuring out what works for you, right? Coming up with a system where saying, instead of trying to do everything, my goal is to prioritize, because prioritization is where productivity comes from.
Let's take what Paula and Charles are discussing one step further. We had time management guru Rory Vaden in the studio. Let's hear what he had to say about this concept.
Creating results is not about the volume of tasks that we complete, it's about the significance of them. And so it's not about completing a lot of trivial tasks that matter, it's about completing a few of the big things that multiply time, that create more time today than you have tomorrow.
Isn't that fascinating? Dialing in on the most important tasks aren't just going to simplify your life, they actually create more time for you to invest in what matters most. Prioritizing. I know I said we're not adding hours to the day, but we are going to maximize the ones we've got.
And how do you know what to prioritize? Just backing that up, let's take that one step back. How do you know what to prioritize? Are there certain questions that you need to ask yourself?
I think the most important question is to ask yourself, what am I doing simply because it feels good to be done with it? And what am I doing because I think it's the hard, important thing to do? Okay. So there's this thing known as the need for cognitive closure. About a third of people who write to-do lists will actually write something on that to-do list that they've already finished because it feels so good to them to cross it off. Right?
I'm laughing because this is me. I like to put things that I've already accomplished or things that are very easy to accomplish because I don't feel like I've accomplished anything unless I've crossed through the to-do list. And so then what I end up doing is I wait and I procrastinate for those heavy assignments, and they just keep getting pushed further and further in the to-do list.
And they make you more and more stressed.
Yes, and then I can't sleep.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So, and that's totally fine. This is known as, within psychology, this is known as a need for cognitive closure. I need to have something that makes me feel like I'm productive, as opposed to actually being productive.
Right.
And so the question you asked, how do we prioritize? The first thing is to say, if you're putting that on your to-do list or on your memory list,
right,
that's okay. If you wake up in the morning and you do a couple of emails because it makes you feel good, like you're on top of stuff, that's okay. But recognize that you're doing that for emotional repair or for emotional needs, not necessarily for productive needs, right?
I got it, yeah.
And then the next question becomes, when you look at that list, what is the thing that if you were to do it would make you feel different? Our emotions are oftentimes a guide as to what is either stressing us the most or what offers the most reward. And very frequently, if we look at that long list and we say, you know, there's this, I've been meaning to write that letter and I put it off every single day. And the reason why is because like, it's a tough letter. It's going to make me deal with like some issues that like, there's some conflict in it. I need to think hard about it. And I keep on pushing it on the list and it's keeping me up at night and it's making me stressed. That feeling of knowing that this is the hard thing that you're irrationally putting off, that is the indicator that that is the most productive thing you can do today. Okay. Because once you do that, not only...
That feeling of dread?
That feeling of dread or that feeling, imagine for a minute how you'll feel after you're done with it. Right? The dread is easy to get caught up in. It's easy to be a stumbling block. But if you look at your memory list, and there's a couple of items on there where you feel that dread, ask yourself, if I get that done, how am I going to feel afterwards?
That's a good question to ask.
Yeah. And that's going to tell you what your priorities are. And two things are going to happen once you do that task. Number one, you're going to get something important off your plate, right? Number two, you're going to unlock all those emotions and all that cognitive capacity that's spent dreading that to solve another problem. So you're actually helping yourself in two ways. That's how we figure out how to prioritize, is to say, I've got 7 things on this memory list. Let me just ask, which one of them am I going to feel best if I can mark it off?
I like that because I told my husband, I said, I've had a really hard time sleeping because I've had some things weighing on me, hanging over my head because I haven't done them. I've been putting them off because of the dread involved. And it's affected me in my entire body. It's affected me, psychologically, physiologically. It's affected my sleep. It's affected my interaction with my children. So I'm going to ask myself that question. How am I going to feel if I get this off of my plate? Well, and allow that to really motivate me to get it done. Absolutely.
And once you start thinking that way, it is motivating, right? Because you're, instead of thinking about the hard work you have to do, you're thinking about the reward you're going to get. An important part of this is to recognize our emotions evolved for a reason, right? There's a selective pressure on why we have emotions, why we have certain thoughts. They exist to help us.
Right.
And when we start listening to those almost subconscious impulses, they can tell us what's important and what isn't.
Okay, so we talked about some individual ways to prioritize. Let's talk about some principles when it comes to teams and in the business world. You give the example in your book, Smarter, Faster, Better, about Saturday Night Live. And it says researchers eventually concluded that the good teams had succeeded not because of innate qualities of team members, but because of how they treated one another. Put differently, the most successful teams had norms that caused everyone to mesh particularly well. So tell us about this specific example about SNL and how we can then apply what SNL is doing to our team leadership.
I love this story because I grew up watching SNL. You probably grew up watching SNL. So the first early years of Saturday Night Live were kind of, everyone thought it was going to fail. And the reason they thought it was going to fail is because Lorne Michaels, the producer of the show, he basically went out and he recruited all of these misanthropes to work together, right?
Yeah.
You had people like Chevy Chase and Dan Aykroyd and all these writers. First of all, most of the time they were out of their mind on some substance.
Right.
Second of all, they were all having affairs with each other. Third of all, they're comedians, so they were weirdos to begin with. And you put them all in this room together. And by the way, when one of them gets on the air, it means someone else isn't getting on the air, right? It's a competitive environment.
There's a little bit of ego involved.
And there's a little bit of ego. And this is like a recipe for disaster. And everyone who is working on this show is like, oh my gosh, this is going to fail in a season. But instead, it becomes the longest living television show in history. And why? Because Lorne Michaels has this way of running meetings. When he goes into a meeting, what he does is he sits down and he has a little card with everyone's name on it who's in that meeting, and he checks off every single time someone speaks. And if you don't have enough checks next to your name, Lorne Michaels will say, Jim, I haven't heard from you in a little while. Can you tell me what you're thinking about?
Oh, he's fostering an environment where they feel empowered to speak up.
Exactly. It's something known in the science as equality and conversational turn-taking. And we know that it's an ingredient of good teams, of psychological safety, of why some teams succeed is because you don't have some people who dominate the conversation and you don't have wallflowers. But then there's a second thing he did, which is really important. He engaged in ostentatious listening. So it's not enough just to speak up. You need to know that you're being heard. And so what Lorne Michaels would do, and he's kind of a shy guy, but in a meeting, every single time you say something, he acts like you just said the smartest thing on the face of the planet. A couple minutes later, he'll say, I remember when Larry said that one thing that was really smart, Larry. And what's interesting is that when a team leader does that, everyone else in the team starts doing it too. We all start ostentatiously listening without even noticing it when who's ever running the meeting does that. And as a result, we have this environment where people are being encouraged to speak and they feel like they're listened to. And so it doesn't matter if everyone likes each other. It doesn't matter if we all get along. What matters is that I feel like I have a voice in this room and that people are hearing me.
Yes, I feel seen and heard.
That creates psychological safety. That's how a team comes together.
But it has to start with the leader.
The leader
has to
is
start
the
with
key.
the leader.
The leader is the key because exactly what you mentioned, those norms, those group behaviors, the habits that a team develops, we learn those and pattern those over who's ever at the head of the table.
That's an inspiring and practical example about how Lorne Michaels created psychological safety at SNL and how that fostered a productive team environment. The fact is, he was the leader. But what if you're not the identified leader? Novartis professor at Harvard Business School, Amy Edmondson, has some advice that I thought was super practical. Let's take a listen.
If you're not the boss or you're not the team leader, many people think, well, there's nothing I can do. I have to wait for the leader to do something. And the truth is, leaders do have an outsized influence on the psychological safety of a team or an organization. But you have to distinguish between leader, which is a role, and leadership, which is a behavior. And leadership is the behavior that influence others in positive ways. It turns out that any one of us can exercise leadership at any point. The kind of leadership that you can exercise as merely a team member to make a difference in your team is quite profound. And it turns out the same things that I recommend leaders do are things that you can do. Frame the work. You can actually remind your colleagues that we're up against an incredibly challenging, unfamiliar, unknown path ahead, and everybody's voice might matter. Like, you can say things like that. You can call attention to uncertainty, to interdependence, and that helps other people understand that their participation matters. Second, anyone can exercise leadership on a team by asking good questions of their colleagues, even of their leaders. Just ask questions every single time you ask a thoughtful question of a colleague. You are giving that person a gift, the gift of your interest, the gift of your respect, because you are implicitly saying, I think you have something to contribute here. Any one of us can do that. And of course, responding productively is something you can do as well. On a team, if someone suggests an idea, you can say, hey, that's interesting, I'd like to learn more. Wow, you just made it more psychologically safe, and you advance the conversation at the same time.
You talk about psychological safety, demonstration by a team leader, the example that Google, what Google had to say. They said, we think we need superstars, but that's not what research found. You can take a team of average performers, and if you teach them to interact the right way, they will do things that no superstar could ever accomplish. So how do you teach those on your team to interact the right way?
So the key is to make them think about it, right? So some teams, you want a norm, a group norm, where people interrupt each other, right? That feels exciting, it feels dynamic. Other teams don't like that. They want people to speak in an organized way, that I don't interrupt you, we're respectful towards each other. The exact norms differ from team to team. What matters is the team choosing those norms, or are they just happening on their own? Okay. Which means that maybe it's just the strongest willed person is imposing their norms on everyone else. Maybe it's a dysfunctional norm. And again, we talked about conversational turn taking and ostentatious listening. This is what Google teaches its team leaders to do. It tells them, create that card with everyone's name on it, make a checkoff when everyone speaks, keep track of this, listen ostentatiously by repeating what someone just said.
It's so good and it's so simple.
That's the brilliance about it, is it is so simple. But when you think about it, it gets at something deep, which is when I'm choosing how to behave, when I am patterning for other people, then one of the things that I'm doing is I'm asking them to decide how they want to behave. Rather than just reacting, I'm asking them, what norms, what culture should our team have? Let's choose it together. Because if we do choose it together, then we're all more committed to it.
It's collaborative.
That's exactly
Everybody's on the same page.
Creating psychological safety on a team is so important. Is this conversation stirring up questions in you? We had a listener send in a question for Charles. Here's Abby.
Hey, Charles, if you're in a team that has had struggles, how do you create psychological safety?
It's a hard one, right? So oftentimes, if your team has had conflict, if your team has had a hard time gelling together, the first thing you need to do is you need to reset. You need to acknowledge that tension and not just hope that it goes away on its own, but put it on the table and say, this is a problem that we all can solve together. And then you have to be vulnerable, particularly as a team leader, because you're asking other people to come to work into a situation where they might not feel safe because they might feel like they've been attacked, there might have been conflict, and you're asking them to commit to it, to expose some vulnerability. And as a leader, what you need to do is you need to expose your own vulnerability. You need to say, look, I had some problems in my marriage, and this is how we worked through them. This team is like my marriage. Let's try.
Okay, so what is the point of exposing your own vulnerability as a leader?
When you expose your vulnerability, you make it safe for other people to expose their vulnerability. And if we've had conflict, we're scared. Our instinct is to flinch away, is to be self-protective and defensive. Vulnerability is the antithesis of defensiveness. But you can't ask other people to be vulnerable if you yourself are not.
Once again, it starts with the leader.
Absolutely.
I like that.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we talked about the principle of teams. I want to talk about the principle of managing others and empowering others to make decisions. You mentioned in your book a Stanford study on company culture. The study was conducted back in 1994. Can you tell us the 5 different cultures that Stanford discovered?
I love this study. I'm so glad you like this study because it's so these 2 researchers, they're at Stanford, and they start looking at startups, right? Companies. This is before basically Silicon Valley becomes Silicon Valley.
Right, this is 1994.
Exactly. It's way back when. And so they start studying all these companies that end up being the biggest companies on earth, right? Yahoo, Google, Apple. They get in early. And as they're looking, they're trying to figure out, like, what are the different cultures that these companies have? And they find there's 5 basic buckets, right? There's the star culture, which is, the star culture is somebody says, let's go hire the smartest, best people we can and put them in a room together and they're going to do something amazing, right? That's kind of how Silicon Valley is supposed to work. You find the stars. Then there's the engineering culture, right? The engineering culture says, get a bunch of engineers, live by the engineering way of seeing the world, let them build their thing. There's the autocratic culture, right? The autocratic culture is I'm the CEO, I'm the founder, I can tell you what to do, I know how to do all this stuff. There's the bureaucratic culture. The bureaucratic culture is the one where you say, if we come up with all the right rules, then it really doesn't matter who we hire because the rules will help everyone do things the right way. Then there's this 5th culture that they call the commitment culture. And the commitment culture is kind of weird because in the commitment culture, they're not thinking about rules. They're not thinking about stars. What they're saying is, we want to hire good people, but once we have hired them, we want to be committed to them as much as we can. We want to avoid firing people at all costs. If someone has to be fired, they have to, but we're going to do everything we can to help them be their best self at work. Now, these researchers, they figure the star culture is going to be the number one winner,
yes,
right?
Absolutely. Well, it's kind of like common sense would tell you.
Exactly. You go to Stanford.
Hire the best people.
Yeah,
right?
Hire the best people, get the smartest guys out of Stanford, and you get Google. So they start doing this research. They find star culture does okay. The other cultures, they all go bankrupt. And in fact, the star cultures, they go bankrupt too. The only culture that ends up persisting, the only companies that do well, is the commitment culture. And what's interesting is that all these places that we think of as being filled with stars, like Google or Facebook or Apple, they actually transition to commitment culture basically after 5 or 6 years, because they realize the star culture is tearing them apart. You get two geniuses in a room, and they're as likely to fight with each other as they are.
I've worked in television news for a long time. I'm very familiar with that type of atmosphere. But what's happening? I know the commitment culture. You're saying I'm committed to you. Last resort is firing. Explain to us what commitment actually looks like in that sort of environment.
What commitment says is that when I walk into a room, your success is as important to me as my success is.
Okay.
So it doesn't mean we're best friends. It doesn't mean that I overlook your weaknesses or that I let you get by with less than perfect work. It also doesn't mean that if you're not doing your job well, I don't come to you and say, look, we need to put you in another job. And if it doesn't work out, maybe we do have to find another opportunity for you. But it means that by the time we get to that conversation, you believe that I have done everything I can to help you succeed. Because the truth of the matter is, we all want to succeed, and all of us are an expert in something. This is the other thing that the book gets into, is this attitude towards managing others around lean, right? The lean workplace, the lean methodology. And if you're in business, you've probably heard this before, lean manufacturing. What lean manufacturing and the lean methodology says is whoever is closest to a problem oftentimes is the expert in that problem. So I might be the CEO and you might be the janitor.
Right.
But as the janitor, you know like what cleaning supplies we should buy a lot better than I, the CEO, do. And if I don't ask you and get your advice and empower you to tell me and help you succeed, then I'm not doing my job as CEO.
So you're overtly telling people, I know you have strengths. I want to play you to those strengths. I want to see you succeed. I'm going to put you in a lane to succeed. I'm going to tell you your position and tell you what's expected of you. But I believe you can thrive in this lane where your strengths lie.
That's exactly right. And I know that you have weaknesses, and I do too. And instead of just pointing out your weaknesses and saying this is a liability, I want you to know I'm committed to helping you improve that weakness, overcome that weakness. So that's again, good. For television news, imagine what it would be like if you went into a room and the anchor, the biggest person on the face of the planet, says to this lowliest producer, look, my job is to make sure you succeed. Anyone would do anything for that person.
We say that you would run through a wall through that person,
exactly.
That your level of commitment is exponential. That's so good. Are you ready for a quick lightning round?
Yes.
And then we're going to be done?
I'm ready.
Okay. And remember, it's lightning.
Okay. Lightning.
It's not a slow roll. It is fast. Okay. What book are you reading right now?
I'm reading Michael Lewis's new book about the pandemic.
Okay. What's the one tool that you use every day?
My Apple Watch.
Okay.
I track my running.
Okay. What's the habit that has most changed your life?
Exercise. Overwhelmingly.
I'm totally with you on that one. What app do you use the most? I know you just said your Apple Watch, but what app do you use the most?
Okay, this is embarrassing. I use something called Surfline and Dawn Patrol.
Surfline?
Surfline.
Okay.
It has cameras of surf spots, so I know where to go, so I can tell if the waves are good or not.
And in your defense, you just moved to California.
I did.
So
I just
you're
moved to
obsessed
California.
with you moved from California. Or you moved to California from New York, so you're a little obsessed with waves right now.
Exactly.
Okay, no judgment there. Who is the person in history that you'd like to have dinner with? This could be somebody past or present.
You know, if it was present, it would probably be Barack Obama, because I'd just be curious. And then if it was past, I think it would be FDR.
Okay. All right.
He seems like there was something special about him, it seemed like.
All right. If you had a mantra, or if you do have a mantra, what would it be, or what is it?
This is what I say to my kids a lot. It's only a mistake if you don't learn something from it. Because I make mistakes all day long. But as long as you learn something from it, then it's okay.
Yeah. I remember having a conversation with a friend of mine, Kathy Lee Gifford. Her father told her, I love you too much to deny you the privilege of making mistakes. And I thought that was such a good way to explain mistakes, as it emboldened her, and I think it can embolden us to make mistakes, because if you're learning from it, it's truly not a mistake. I learn more from failures than I do from my successes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it teaches you to take risks, right? Because if you're conducting experiments and you see them as experiments are designed to fail. If every experiment you conduct works, you're not doing the right experiments.
That's right. And failure is normal.
Yeah.
Failure, let's normalize failure. Okay, last question for you. I want you to fill in the blank here, Charles. My influence is blank. And it could be writing, it could be connecting, it could be curiosity, whatever it may be, running. I want you to fill in the blank here. Complete this sentence. My influence is this.
My influence is storytelling. That is the thing that I love. I love to do. I love to experience. It is the question that has driven every single thing I've done, is how to tell stories that people are desperate to finish.
Yeah, and you are a phenomenal storyteller. You are fun to listen to. And if you haven't read Charles's books, I encourage you to do so. New York Times bestsellers for a reason. You have another book coming out soon?
Well, not so soon. I'm writing it right now. So
can you give us a sneak peek?
Yeah, it's about the science of conversation, about why some conversations succeed and other conversations fail, and how, particularly in this world that seems like it's becoming even more polarized, how do we actually connect with someone in a way that is meaningful?
Oh, that's so good.
And something new.
I love it. And when is that book coming out?
That's a good question.
You're like, wait a second, my publisher is online too. All right, Charles, it's been a pleasure. Thanks so much for joining us for the Global Leadership Podcast.
Wait, before you hit that pause button, I want to inspire you with a story. Remember how Charles said the most important thing to prioritizing is knowing your why? Jamie Franklin said he never wanted to be a leader. But through the years, as a leader in healthcare, he's discovered the true meaning of leadership and how it can shift culture and help people thrive. He's learned to focus on the why no matter what role he's in. For him, it was all about creating healthy community. Jamie knew that if he wanted to have a healthy community, they had to start by building a healthy culture as an organization. Jamie talked with one of our staff members. This is what he said. I know in any meeting, I'm not the smartest person in the room, but I've tried to establish a culture where everybody is heard and everybody contributes. My favorite meetings are when you have 8 people with different ideas about how to solve a problem, but after an hour of collaboration, trust, breaking down silos, and working together on the ideas, you come out with a 9th solution that is even better than the 8 you started with. Wow, what an amazing picture of what a healthy, psychologically safe, and productive team can look like. I encourage you to go check out more of Jamie's story. We'll link to it in our show notes. I've loved taking this journey with you today, getting curious about productivity. But guess what? The leadership journey is never over. I want to make sure you know about the premier leadership event coming up in the US on August 5th and 6th. The Global Leadership Summit is designed for change-driven people just like you. These 2 incredible days will be filled with leadership insight and encouragement from a world-class faculty featuring people like best-selling author Malcolm Gladwell, clinical psychologist and leadership expert Dr. Henry Cloud, fashion designer Jerry Lorenzo, Harvard professor Dr. Francesca Gino, founder of IT Cosmetics, Jamie Kern-Lima. Even Charles Duhigg will make an appearance, plus so many more. In addition to this world-class faculty, we are designing and crafting moments to leave you inspired and equipped to lead right where you are with strength, resilience, and hope. Be sure to use your exclusive listener code podcast21, that's podcast21, at checkout and get $60 off your regular ticket price. Go to globalleadership.org/summit to secure your tickets today. And again, remember that's podcast21 to get that $60 off. But if you're ready for more leadership insights right now and just don't want to wait until August, we have got you covered. Go to globalleadership.org/leadership now, where you can access loads of free resources and also check out the podcast show notes. That's globalleadership.org/leadership now. Well, thanks so much for joining me today. I have so enjoyed being your guide in today's conversation. If this has been helpful for you, be sure to share, rate, and subscribe. I can't wait to see you at the summit, and until next time, stay curious, my friends.